Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time to the thunderous roar of the Roman Circus Maximus, a place where glory and grisly death rode hand in hand. Forget the glamour you see in movies. We're diving deep into the grim reality of what it meant to be a charioteer, arguably the most dangerous job in Rome. This wasn't just a sport, it was a brutal spectacle, a high-speed collision course where every turn could be your last. Imagine holding on for dear life as four powerful horses hurdle you around a dirt track, with dozens of other chariots fighting for position, all at breakneck speed. You think your commute is a nightmare? Try navigating that chaos without seatbelts or airbags, with death lurking in every wheel turn. You'd probably not even finish the first lap. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the starting gates, your heart thumping a frantic drum against your ribs. The air vibrates with the roar of the crowd, a deafening wave of anticipation from hundreds of thousands of spectators crammed into the vast, open-air arena. The smell of dust, sweat, horse, and excited humanity fills your nostrils. You are a charioteer, a factio of the red team, identifiable by the crimson tunic wrapped tightly around your frame. Your body, though lean and powerful, feels impossibly small next to the colossal force about to be unleashed. This is stepping onto the track, and in this moment, the raw, brutal reality of your profession hits you with the force of a charging bull. Around you, other chariots are lining up, each with its own team of horses and its own driver, clad in the colors of the blues, whites, or greens. The tension is palpable, a coiled spring ready to release. You can hear the horses snorting, pawing at the ground, their powerful muscles rippling under their coats. Their breath is hot, their eyes wild. These aren't just trained animals, they are barely controlled forces of nature, about to be pushed to their absolute limits, and you, a mere human, are bound to them. Your chariot itself is a flimsy, almost ridiculously light structure. It's a small, open wooden platform, barely enclosing your legs, designed for speed, not protection. Two wheels, often with thin iron rims, are your only contact with the unforgiving dirt track. There's no elaborate suspension, no shock absorption. Every bump, every rut, every stone will be transmitted directly through the floorboards to your feet, jarring your teeth and rattling your bones. You grasp the reins, wrapped tightly around your waist, a design choice that will prove tragically significant. A small, curved knife, your falx, is tucked into your belt for a very specific, grim purpose. You wear a leather helmet, perhaps some shin guards and a padded tunic, but it feels utterly inadequate against the forces you're about to face. It's like strapping yourself to a speeding bullet with nothing but a bicycle helmet. The starting signal, the mappa, drops, a collective gasp, then an explosive roar from the crowd. The gates fly open, and your world explodes into motion. Four horses lunge forward, their hooves churning the dirt, their powerful bodies straining against the harness. You are thrown back against the flimsy chariot, your arms burning as you struggle to control the surging power. The initial rush is a chaotic scramble for position. Other chariots lurch forward around you, some faster, some slower, all jostling, swerving, and threatening to collide. The dust immediately rises, thick and blinding, kicked up by hundreds of hooves. It stings your eyes, fills your mouth, and quickly coats everything in a gritty film. Visibility drops dramatically, turning the entire arena into a swirling brown haze, punctuated by the fleeting glimpses of other chariots and the flashes of their colored tunics. The track itself is a brutal gauntlet, The Circus Maximus is an oval, nearly 2,000 feet long and 400 feet wide, but the real danger lies in the turns. At either end of the spina, the central dividing barrier, are the conical turning posts. These are not gentle curves. You must swing your horses and chariot around these tight, deadly markers at full speed. This is where most of the crashes happen. You hear the screech of wheels, the terrified whinny of horses, the splintering crack of wood, and the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. It's a constant, terrifying symphony of destruction. You see chariots ahead of you, their drivers perhaps too ambitious, too reckless, taking the turn too tightly. They clip the meta, or their inner horses falter, sending the entire rig into a violent, uncontrolled skid. The chariot flips, a tangle of wood, leather, and flailing hooves. The driver is thrown, a rag doll flung into the dirt, instantly lost in the churn of dust and thunderous hooves. A truly terrifying aspect was that the Metae were often decorated with precious materials, making them a literal and figurative immovable object that could shatter a charioteer's hopes and bones in an instant. You navigate the turns with a desperate blend of skill and instinct, pulling on the reins, leaning hard, yelling encouragement or curses at your horses. Your focus is absolute, a tunnel vision born of adrenaline and the primal urge to survive. You're not just racing against other chariots, you're racing against the very laws of physics. The centrifugal force tries to pull you wide, sending you careening into the outer wall. Your horses, straining and sweating, fight the urge to run wild. You are a precarious balance of speed and control, always on the verge of losing both. The track is not empty. Littering the ground are the remnants of previous laps, or even earlier races' broken chariot wheels, splintered wood, discarded reins, and worse, the bodies of fallen horses and, occasionally, unlucky drivers. Hitting one of these obstacles at full speed could send your chariot spinning, or worse, cause a horse to trip, bringing down the entire team. There are also track officials, sometimes called sparsors, whose job it is to clear debris, often at immense personal risk, further highlighting the constant danger. It's like racing on a highway littered with car parts and human remains, a gruesome obstacle course. The other charioteers are not just competitors, they are aggressive adversaries. They will cut you off, box you in, and deliberately try to force you into the walls or the spina. They will whip your horses, or even try to entangle your reins. This isn't just a race, it's a high-speed, no-holds-barred brawl. You hear the crack of whips not just on horses, but on other drivers. You feel the jarring impact of chariots bumping and grinding against yours, threatening to rip a wheel off or send you careening. Trust is non-existent. Every other driver is a threat, a potential instrument of your demise. A common academic debate among historians of Roman spectacles concerns the degree to which these collisions were intentional tactics versus unavoidable accidents in such a chaotic environment. Evidence suggests a strong element of deliberate aggression. You complete one lap, then another, the spina markers clicking down, signaling your progress. Your body screams with fatigue. Your arms are numb from the strain. Your lungs burn from the dust and exertion. Your senses are overwhelmed by the roar, the smell, the constant vibration. But there's no time to rest, no moment to relax. The race continues, lap after brutal lap, and with each circuit, the stakes grow higher, the risks more pronounced, and the specter of death looms ever larger. This is the unvarnished reality of your profession, a constant dance with disaster, fueled by adrenaline, fear, and the distant promise of glory, if you can just survive the next turn. You've just survived the initial chaotic surge from the starting gates, the dust stinging your eyes, the roar of the crowd a physical force. Now, you must grapple with the raw, untamed might that propels you forward, the horse's untamed power. These weren't just animals, they were highly bred, intensely trained, and incredibly volatile engines of destruction, and your life depended entirely on your ability to control them. Imagine gripping the reins, the leather straps biting into your waist. Each rein connects to a different horse in your four-horse team. The two inner horses, called the yoke horses, are bound to a central yoke attached to the chariot's pole, bearing the primary burden of pulling. The two outer horses, the trace horses, are attached by ropes or traces, providing additional speed and power. These animals are massive, weighing hundreds of pounds each, bred for explosive speed and endurance. Their muscles ripple under taut, sweating hides, and their hooves thunder against the dirt track with a force that vibrates through your entire body. You are not just guiding them, you are wrestling with four independent, powerful wills, all straining to run free. A fascinating, yet often overlooked, detail is that Roman chariot horses were often quite small compared to modern racing horses, more akin to ponies, yet their combined strength was immense, making their control even more challenging. Controlling this team is a feat of immense strength and precise coordination. You're not holding the reins loosely in your hands. They are wrapped around your waist, giving you more leverage against the horse's tremendous pulling power. This technique, unique to Roman charioteers, provides superior control, but comes with a horrifying downside, which we'll get to later. You lean back, using your entire body weight to pull, to steer, to try and keep the horses running in a straight line, or to coax them into the terrifyingly tight turns. Your arms, shoulders, and core are constantly engaged, burning with effort. It's like trying to pilot a rocket-powered sled made of twigs, guided only by sheer brute force. The horses themselves are wild with adrenaline. The roar of the crowd, the frantic pounding of other hooves, the whips cracking in the air, it all excites them, pushing them to run faster, harder. They are not calm, predictable machines. They can bolt, shy at a shadow, stumble over debris, or panic from a collision. A single misstep by one horse can throw off the entire team, leading to a disastrous pileup. You are constantly anticipating their movements, feeling the subtle shifts in their gait, trying to communicate through the reins in your voice, all at breakneck speed. It's a terrifying dance between human will and animal instinct. Some academic debates still center on the specific breeds of horses used for Roman chariot racing, and whether they were specially bred for speed, strength, or temperament, given the high mortality rates for both horses and drivers. Consider the physical toll of this constant struggle. Your hands are raw from the leather reins. Your back aches from the constant strain of leaning and pulling. Your lungs burn from the dust and exertion. The horse's breath, hot and heavy, washes over you, mingling with the spray of their sweat. You can feel their immense power vibrating through the reins, a living current of energy that both propels you and threatens to tear you apart. This isn't a gentle ride. It's a constant, full-body battle for dominance, a test of pure physical endurance against overwhelming animal strength. Then there's the unpredictability. A horse might stumble, even slightly, throwing off the rhythm of the entire team. Another horse might suddenly pull in an unexpected direction, perhaps startled by a shadow or a shout from the crowd. Or worse, a horse could break a leg mid-race, a catastrophic event that would instantly tangle the entire team, bringing the chariot crashing down in a sickening display of violence. You are constantly on the edge, one bad step away from a horrific accident. The animal welfare standards, as you can imagine, were virtually non-existent. Horses were expendable tools in the pursuit of victory. A popular, yet grim, saying among charioteers might have been, "It's not the fall that kills you. It's the sudden stop with 4 tons of angry horse behind you." The sheer number of horses on the track at once exacerbates the danger. with dozens of chariots, each pulled by 4 horses. The arena is a chaotic mass of churning hooves and straining bodies. Your horses are constantly reacting not just to your commands, but to the horses around them, jostling, kicking, biting in the confined space. A horse from a rival team might lash out, striking your horses or even your chariot. The sound of dozens of hooves thundering on the track is deafening, a relentless roar that fills your ears and makes communication with your team almost impossible. You rely on instinct, on muscle memory, and on the raw, primal connection you formed with your animals through countless hours of training. Even the simple act of training these powerful animals was fraught with danger. You spent countless hours with them, building trust, learning their individual temperaments, but they remained wild at heart. A kick, a bite, a sudden bolt. Any of these could end your career or your life before you even reach the starting gates of the Circus Maximus. The bond between a charioteer and his horses was often profound, but it was a bond forged in the crucible of danger, a mutual reliance where one wrong move could cost both their lives. The life of a charioteer, then, was defined by this constant, intimate wrestling match with untamed power. You were strapped to a force of nature, barely contained, always on the verge of erupting into uncontrollable chaos. The horses were your partners, your engines, and your greatest threat. Every lap was a test of your strength, your skill, and your sheer courage in the face of overwhelming animalistic might. A relentless reminder of why this was truly the most dangerous job in Rome. You learned to read their every tremor, to anticipate their every surge, for your life depended on mastering their untamed power. You felt the terrifying strength of the horses, their raw power barely held in check, but your danger isn't solely from the animals themselves. It's also from the flimsy contraption you're strapped into. This brings us to the chariot's fragile fury, the alarming reality that your racing vehicle was a featherlight, easily shattered death trap designed for speed above all else, with utter disregard for the driver's safety. Imagine your chariot, often called a biga for 2 horses or a quadriga for 4. It's not the robust, armored war machine you might imagine from historical epics. Instead, picture a tiny, open-backed wooden platform, barely large enough for your feet, a sort of minimalist basket on wheels. It's constructed from the lightest possible woods, perhaps willow or birch, expertly bent and shaped. The floor might be little more than woven straps of leather or wicker, offering minimal support and no protection from the rough track below. The entire structure is held together with leather thongs and a few bronze fittings, designed to flex and give way under stress, not to absorb impact. It's like racing in a glorified wicker laundry basket with wheels, and you're the dirty laundry, a common, yet often surprising detail to modern viewers is just how small and delicate these chariots actually were, prioritizing extreme lightness for speed. The wheels are equally precarious. They are often spoked, with thin wooden rims, sometimes reinforced with a narrow band of iron. These aren't the solid, robust wheels of a modern vehicle. They are designed to be light, to spin quickly, but they are incredibly vulnerable. A sharp impact with another chariot, a misplaced stone, or a sudden jolt could easily splinter a spoke, shatter a rim, or send the entire wheel buckling inwards. When a wheel collapses at full speed, the entire chariot instantly becomes a death trap, throwing you violently to the ground or dragging you beneath the hooves of your own team or those of your competitors. The sound of splintering wood and crunching metal was a common accompaniment to any race. There's absolutely no suspension. Every bump, every rut, every piece of debris on the track sends a jarring shockwave directly through the chariot's frame and into your body. Your bones, muscles, and internal organs are subjected to constant, violent vibrations, lap after punishing lap. This isn't just uncomfortable, It contributes to chronic injuries, spinal damage, and internal bruising that would accumulate over your career, slowly breaking down your body even if you avoided a fatal crash. You are, quite literally, shaken to your core with every circuit of the arena. The open design of the chariot, while allowing for maximum maneuverability and a clear line of sight, offers no protection whatsoever. You are completely exposed. Your legs are vulnerable to flailing hooves from your own team, or the hooves of passing chariots. Your body is unprotected against impacts from other chariots, flying debris, or the metae, those deadly turning posts. A light blow could break a rib. A glancing hit could send you spiraling. There's no roll cage, no safety harness beyond your reins, no modern safety features. You are utterly at the mercy of the chaos around you. It's a miracle anyone survived a full race, let alone multiple seasons. Even the way the chariot was hitched to the horses contributed to its fragility and danger. The central pole extended between the two yoke horses, attaching to the yoke. The trace horses were attached by ropes to the chariot's axle or frame. This intricate system of leather, wood, and rope, while allowing for immense power, was also a single point of failure. If a strap snapped, if a piece of wood fractured, the delicate balance was destroyed, instantly turning your coordinated team into a confused, out-of-control mass of panicked animals and splintering wood. A chariot could completely disintegrate around you in a matter of seconds. Maneuvering this fragile fury was an art form. You had to lean into turns, shift your weight, and coax your horses with subtle movements of the reins, all while maintaining balance on a platform barely wider than your shoulders. Imagine trying to stand upright on a speeding surfboard in a crowded wave pool, while simultaneously steering four powerful animals. The slightest miscalculation, the briefest loss of balance, could send you tumbling into the path of dozens of thundering hooves. Your grip, your core strength, and your incredibly sharp reflexes were your only protection. Academic historians sometimes debate the exact materials used for chariot construction, as the limited archaeological evidence often makes definitive conclusions challenging, highlighting the ephemeral nature of these machines. The constant threat of mechanical failure was also ever present. Wheels could seize, axles could snap, and wooden frames could crack under the extreme stress of repeated races. Even a minor malfunction, undetected before the race, could quickly escalate into a catastrophic failure mid-lap. You were relying on the skill of the chariot builders and the quality of the materials, but in an era without modern engineering and quality control, flaws were inevitable. The wear and tear from a single race could be immense, and these chariots were often reused, pushing their fragile limits even further. A dark joke among Roman citizens might have been that a charioteer's lifespan was directly proportional to the number of times his chariot's wheels had been replaced. The constant vibration, the relentless jarring, and the repeated near misses created a level of sensory overload that would be unbearable to most. The screech of wheels, the splintering of wood from other crashes, the roar of the crowd, the thundering hooves. It was a cacophony of chaos. This constant assault on your senses, combined with the physical demands, contributed to a state of heightened anxiety and exhaustion, making it even harder to maintain the razor-sharp focus required to survive. Ultimately, the chariot itself, while the symbol of your glory, was also the primary instrument of your peril. It was a machine designed on the knife edge of speed, prioritizing performance over safety to an extent that is unthinkable in modern sports. Its fragility, its open design, and its precarious construction meant that every single lap was an act of extreme courage and a dance with death. You were strapped into a device of brutal beauty, a testament to Roman engineering ingenuity, but one that held no quarter for the human life it carried, making every race a stark reminder of the chariot's truly fragile fury. You've felt the terrifying strength of the horses and the shocking fragility of the chariot. Now, Let's consider the stage upon which these deadly dramas unfolded the arena's brutal design. The Circus Maximus, Rome's largest and most famous chariot racing venue, wasn't just a track. It was a meticulously crafted death trap designed to maximize spectacle and collision, making every race a near-guaranteed exercise in carnage. Imagine standing on the track itself, before the roaring crowd fills the stands. The sheer scale is overwhelming. The Circus Maximus was enormous, over 2,000 feet long and 400 feet wide, capable of holding hundreds of thousands of spectators. It stretched across the valley between the Palatine and Aventine hills, a colossal monument to Roman entertainment. The track surface itself was just compacted dirt, a mixture of sand and soil. It offered little grip for the thin, hard chariot wheels, especially when wet, and quickly became churned up by hundreds of hooves, making it uneven, dusty, and prone to ruts. This wasn't a pristine modern racetrack. It was a raw, unforgiving surface designed for spectacle, not safety. The most notorious and deadly feature of the Circus Maximus was the spina, the long, narrow dividing barrier that ran down the center of the track. It wasn't just a decorative median. This stone barrier, often adorned with elaborate statues, obelisks, and lap-counting dolphins or eggs, was an immovable, unyielding obstacle. Imagine hurtling around the track at terrifying speed, with only a few feet separating your chariot from this solid stone wall. There was absolutely no margin for error. A slight swerve, a jostle from a rival, or a momentary loss of control could send your chariot smashing directly into the spina, with catastrophic results. The sheer length of the spina meant that collision points were abundant, ensuring that crashes were not just possible, but highly probable. At each end of the spina were the infamous medi, conical turning posts. These were the true crucibles of death. Imagine these enormous, solid stone cones, often decorated and massive, marking the tightest points of the entire track. You had to guide your 4 horses and fragile chariot around these medi with surgical precision. At full speed, this created immense centrifugal force, constantly threatening to pull your chariot wide into the outer wall or, worse, to send your inner horses crashing into the meta itself. A common tactic for rival charioteers was to try and box you in or force you wide at these turns, knowing full well that hitting the meta meant instant disaster. The sound of a chariot shattering against a meta was a familiar and terrifying sound to any regular spectator. A curious and darkly ironic detail is that the very decorations on the metae, the elaborate bronze or marble statues, were sometimes damaged or broken off during particularly violent crashes, creating even more dangerous debris on the track. The turns around the medi were incredibly tight, far tighter than any modern racetrack. This forced the chariots to pivot sharply, putting immense stress on the wheels, axles, and harnesses. It maximized the risk of flipping, tangling horses, or sending the entire rig into a violent, uncontrolled spin. The design was, quite clearly, for maximum entertainment value, with the understanding that this entertainment would be fueled by high-speed collisions and spectacular crashes. Public demand for such a brutal spectacle directly influenced this dangerous design. The outer walls of the Circus Maximus offered no softness, no give. They were solid stone or brick, a hard, unforgiving surface that provided no cushioning in a collision. If you were forced into the wall, or lost control and slammed into it, the impact would be devastating. There were no safety barriers, no tire walls, no modern protections. It was a simple, brutal equation. Solid wall meets fragile chariot and unprotected human body. Even the starting gates, the carcers, posed a unique hazard. These were designed to release all the chariots simultaneously, ensuring a chaotic, high-speed dash for the inner lane. Imagine dozens of chariots, each with 4 powerful horses, all exploding forward at the exact same moment into a relatively narrow opening. The initial scramble for position was a maelstrom of jostling, bumping, and whipping. Where the risk of collision was incredibly high even before the first turn, it was a manufactured chaos designed to ignite the excitement of the crowd from the very first second. The sheer length of the track also contributed to its brutality. 7 laps were common, sometimes more, meaning repeated navigation of those deadly medi. The track would become increasingly churned up, littered with debris from previous crashes, splintered wood, broken wheels, possibly even the bodies of fallen horses or drivers who hadn't been fully cleared. Hitting this debris at speed was a constant threat, another opportunity for disaster. Track attendants, the sparsors, risked their own lives dashing onto the track between laps to clear the most dangerous debris, a testament to the continuous nature of the peril. Some academic discussions still debate the exact frequency of track clearing during a race and how effective it truly was in preventing further accidents. The arena's design was not accidental, it was deliberate. The Roman fascination with spectacle, with high stakes, and with the ultimate test of man and beast, directly informed the hazardous layout. The architects and engineers of the Circus Maximus built a stage for glory and destruction, knowing full well that the more dangerous the race, the more thrilled the crowds would be. It wasn't about minimizing risk. It was about maximizing the dramatic potential of every single lap. The screams of the crowd, far from being a distant murmur, were a constant amplified roar within the amphitheater, further contributing to the sensory overload and the horses' heightened excitement. Ultimately, the arena itself was as much an adversary as the other charioteers. Its unforgiving surface, its solid spina, its brutal midi, and its unyielding walls were all designed to punish error and amplify collision. Every feature was a deliberate obstacle, turning the race into a perilous dance with disaster, where the stage was literally set for death. You didn't just race on the track, you battled the track itself. A testament to why the arena's brutal design was a primary reason being a charioteer was the most dangerous job in Rome. You've seen the sheer brutality baked into the very design of the Roman arena, but the track and the fixed obstacles were only half the battle. Your greatest, most immediate threat came from the other racers, transforming every event into a high-speed, no-holds-barred gladiatorial contest on wheels. This is the realm of competitors, crashes, and carnage, where intentional aggression and the constant threat of collision were as much a part of the sport as speed itself. Imagine the starting gates opening, not just for one chariot, but for as many as 12 at a time, each pulled by 4 thundering horses. The initial charge is a maelstrom of barely controlled chaos. Every charioteer, fueled by adrenaline and the desperate need for the coveted inner lane, is fighting for position. You're not simply trying to run faster than the other guy. You're trying to outmaneuver, to block, to intimidate, and often to deliberately cause an accident. The air fills with shouts, curses, and the frantic cracking of whips, not just on horses, but often aimed at rival drivers and their teams. This isn't polite racing. It's a fight for survival at 30 miles per hour. A common yet chilling historical detail is that some charioteers would tie sharp objects to their whips, intending to injure rival horses or drivers during the chaotic start. The turns around the medi, those deadly turning posts, were prime opportunities for calculated aggression. Imagine you're trying to round the meta as tightly as possible to gain ground. Another charioteer, perhaps from a rival faction, will deliberately try to cut you off or box you in, forcing you wide or worse, pushing you directly into the unyielding stone meta. They'll swerve, jostle, and use the weight of their chariot and horses to literally push you out of the way. It's a ruthless tactic, and if successful, it means instant disaster for you. You'd hear the sickening crunch of wood, the terrified screams of horses, and the roar of the crowd, eager for the spectacle of a naufragium, a shipwreck, or crash. Crashes or shipwreck were not anomalies. They were an expected, even celebrated part of the race. The more spectacular the pileup, the more thrilled the crowd. Imagine a chariot in front of you suddenly losing a wheel or being forced into the spina. It instantly becomes a tangled mess of splintered wood, thrashing horses, and a fallen driver. You have mere milliseconds to react, to swerve, to avoid becoming part of the escalating carnage. But with chariots pressing from all sides and limited visibility due to the dust, avoidance is often impossible. You might smash into the wreckage, adding your own chariot to the growing pile, or be thrown headlong into the fray. The ground quickly becomes littered with debris, turning the track into a minefield of broken parts and, tragically, bodies. The term carnage is not an exaggeration. When a chariot crashed, the driver, often still tangled in the reins wrapped around his waist, would be dragged along the ground at incredible speed, bouncing and tumbling amidst the thundering hooves of other chariots. Imagine being dragged behind a runaway team of horses, your body slamming against the unforgiving dirt, your unprotected head exposed to potentially fatal impacts. Even if you managed to free yourself, you were then at the mercy of the other chariots. It was a common occurrence for fallen drivers to be trampled by the hooves of other horses or crushed by the wheels of subsequent chariots. As the race continued relentlessly over their bodies, there was no yellow flag, no immediate halt to the race. The spectacle continued until the finish. A common, yet gruesome, academic debate focuses on how long bodies and debris remained on the track during a race and how significantly this contributed to further accidents. The competitors themselves were often deeply professional, highly skilled, and utterly ruthless. They knew the risks, and they knew that victory often required extreme aggression. They trained not just to drive fast, but to drive strategically, to exploit every weakness, and to capitalize on every mistake made by their rivals. They were masters of dirty tricks, from subtle pushes to deliberate attempts to entangle reins or snap axles. The stakes were too high, the rewards too immense, for anything less than total commitment, even if that meant risking the lives of their opponents. It's a bit like NASCAR, but if NASCAR drivers were openly trying to flip each other's cars with sharpened blades, even the horses became part of the aggression. They were trained to respond to aggressive whips and shouts, and in the chaotic environment, could kick and bite at rival horses that came too close. A well-placed kick could maim a competitor's horse, effectively taking them out of the race. The horses, already pushed to their physical limits, were also subjected to the psychological stress of this constant, high-speed aggression. The intensity of the factions, the reds, blues, whites, and greens, further fueled this competitive savagery. Each charioteer represented not just himself, but his team, and by extension, the tens of thousands of passionate fans who bet fortunes on their colors. Victory for your faction was everything, and the rivalry was so intense that it often spilled out of the arena into street brawls and political unrest. This fervent loyalty meant that charioteers were under immense pressure to win, no matter the cost, amplifying the aggression on the track. You could almost feel the collective will of your faction's fans pushing you forward, demanding victory, regardless of the peril. Ultimately, the Roman chariot race was less a refined display of horsemanship and more a brutal high-speed demolition derby. The constant threat of collision, the intentional aggression of competitors, and the terrifying consequences of a crash made it a spectacle of extreme carnage. Being a charioteer meant constantly risking violent injury or immediate death, not just from your own mistakes, but from the deliberate actions of every other driver on the track. The roar of the crowd was a hungry sound, craving the next spectacular crash, a chilling reminder that your greatest peril came from the very competitors fighting for the same fleeting glory. You've witnessed the deliberate chaos of the Roman chariot race, where competitors actively engineered carnage. But even beyond the thundering hooves, the fragile chariot, and the brutal arena design, there was one design choice that made the charioteer's job uniquely, horrifyingly dangerous: the reins of death. The specific way charioteers strapped themselves to their horses' power was a terrifying gamble, a design flaw that could turn a minor spill into a fatal entanglement. Imagine standing in your chariot, your feet braced against the flimsy wooden floor. Instead of holding the reins loosely in your hands, as a modern jockey might, you have them wrapped tightly around your waist and torso. This wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was a practical one. With 4, or even more, powerful horses pulling a lightweight chariot at breakneck speeds, holding the reins only with your hands wouldn't provide enough leverage or control. Wrapping them around your body allowed you to use your entire core strength to lean back with all your might, giving you maximum power to guide and restrain the surging animals. It provided an unparalleled connection to the horses, allowing for precise, nuanced control that was vital for winning races. A truly peculiar yet fascinating detail is that the specific number of wraps and the precise way the reins were secured around the charioteer's body could even vary between factions or individual drivers, as each sought to find the optimal balance of control and flexibility. But this ingenious design came with a catastrophic flaw if you fell. Imagine the scenario: your chariot clips a meta, or another competitor forces you into a crash. You lose your balance, your feet slip, and you are instantly thrown from the tiny platform. But you are still tethered to 4,000 pounds of panicked, stampeding horseflesh. The reins, instead of falling away, remain tightly bound around your waist. You are no longer driving the chariot, you are being dragged by it, a human ragdoll bouncing and skidding along the brutal dirt track at immense speed. The ground is hard, uneven, and littered with debris from earlier crashes. Every bump, every stone, every piece of splintered wood becomes a weapon against your unprotected body. Your head slams against the earth, your limbs flail uncontrollably, your tunic tears, and your skin is flayed by the abrasive ground. The dust, which earlier merely stung your eyes, now fills your mouth and lungs, choking you. You can hear the thunder of hooves, your own horses, and those of the chariots rapidly approaching from behind. This is where the small curved knife, the falx, tucked into your belt, becomes your only desperate hope. Imagine the terror of being dragged, utterly out of control, knowing that at any moment your head could smash against the spina, or you could be trampled under the hooves of your own team or a rival's. Your one agonizing chance at survival is to somehow, amidst the chaos and violent motion, reach for that knife and cut yourself free. This requires incredible presence of mind, immense physical dexterity, and sheer, desperate will, all while being dragged at high speed. Many charioteers, disoriented or knocked unconscious by the initial fall, would never get the chance. Some academic discussions still debate the exact design and effectiveness of these falxes, and whether they were truly practical in such extreme situations. If you failed to cut yourself free, the consequences were almost universally fatal. You would be dragged until your body was broken, mangled, or until your own horses, or those of another chariot, trampled you into the dirt. The sight of a charioteer being dragged, a tragic, flailing figure against the backdrop of the continuing race, was a grimly common spectacle in the Roman circus. It was the ultimate horrifying price of that direct connection to the horse's power. A dark joke among the Roman public might have been, A charioteer rides his horses to glory or gets dragged to Hades by them. Even if you did manage to cut yourself free, you weren't safe. You would be lying in the middle of a live racetrack with dozens of thundering hooves still bearing down on you. You'd have mere seconds to roll, to crawl, to somehow get out of the path of the relentless oncoming chariots. The sparsors, the track attendants, risked their own lives to try and retrieve fallen drivers, but often they were too late, or simply couldn't reach you in time amidst the chaos. The survival rate for a significant fall was incredibly low, turning every crash into a potential death sentence. The reins of death, therefore, represent a unique form of peril. Unlike the dangers from other chariots or the arena itself, this was an inherent, built-in risk directly tied to the very technique that made charioteers so effective. It was a conscious trade-off, unparalleled control for unparalleled vulnerability. This design choice highlights the Roman emphasis on spectacle and victory above all else, even human life. The constant awareness of this specific risk must have weighed heavily on every charioteer. Every time they wrapped those reins around their waist before a race, they were consciously, irrevocably, tying themselves to a potential instrument of their own destruction. It was an ultimate act of commitment, a silent pact with fate, where the very tools of their success could become the agents of their demise. This knowledge added a profound layer of psychological pressure to an already incredibly dangerous profession. So, while the crashes were spectacular, and the collisions often intentional, it was often the intimate, deadly connection of the reins to the charioteer's body that sealed their fate. It turned a bad fall into a fatal dragging, a momentary error into a gruesome end. The reins of death were a chilling testament to why being a charioteer was truly the most dangerous job in Rome, a silent, binding promise of ultimate peril. You've seen the intimate, terrifying design of the reins that could turn a charioteer's skill into a death sentence. But beyond the immediate perils of the track, there was another force, unseen but incredibly powerful, that fueled the danger and added layers of pressure to every race factions, fans, and fury. The Roman audience wasn't just observing, they were deeply, passionately, and often violently invested, turning the Circus Maximus into a cauldron of intense, sometimes lethal, emotion. Imagine the roar of the crowd, not as a mere background hum, but as a living, breathing entity. Hundreds of thousands of voices, a mix of patricians and plebeians, men and women, all united by an almost religious fervor for their chosen team. The four major factions, the Blues Veneti, Greens Prasini, Reds Russati, and Whites Albati, were more than just racing stables. They were powerful organizations with vast wealth, political influence, and fan bases that transcended social classes. You, as a charioteer, were not just an athlete. You were a symbol, a champion, and a proxy for the hopes, dreams, and immense wagers of your faction's legions of fans. This immense emotional investment meant that the pressure to win for your faction was almost unbearable. A truly fascinating, yet often overlooked, historical detail is that these factions operated like massive corporations, owning stables, breeding horses, training drivers, and managing vast logistical operations, making them powerful entities in Roman society. The fans were utterly devoted, bordering on obsessive. They would wear the colors of their chosen faction, paint their faces, and spend fortunes on betting. Their passion was all-consuming. They would arrive at the circus hours before the races began, securing their spots, some even camping overnight to get the best views. They knew the names of the horses, the stats of the drivers, and the history of every rivalry. Their loyalty was tribal, often passed down through families. They didn't just watch, they participated, living and dying with every turn of the wheel. When your chariot was ahead, Their cheers would lift you, a wave of pure exhilaration. But if you fell behind, or worse, crashed, their disappointment could be palpable, a collective groan that felt like a physical blow. This intense devotion often spilled over into fury. The rivalry between factions was legendary, frequently escalating into violence outside the arena. Imagine street brawls erupting between groups of blues and greens, fueled by a lost bet or a perceived insult to their team. These weren't just petty skirmishes. They could be deadly. Riots often broke out in the streets of Rome, fueled by factional hatred, sometimes requiring military intervention to quell. Emperors themselves often favored one faction over another, implicitly endorsing the rivalry and sometimes inadvertently fueling the unrest. This meant that as a charioteer, your performance on the track had real-world consequences, influencing public order and even political stability. A common, yet terrifying aspect of this fan fury was the widespread belief in curses. Fans would commission lead curse tablets, defictions, attempting to invoke supernatural forces to cripple rival charioteers or their horses, highlighting the extreme lengths to which their fanaticism would go. The pressure on you, the charioteer, was immense. You weren't just racing for personal glory or prize money. You were racing for the honor of your faction, for the fortunes of thousands of gamblers, and for your own very survival. A victory meant immense adulation, lavish rewards, and the adoration of the masses. A defeat, especially a spectacular crash, meant not just physical injury, but potentially the wrath of disappointed fans. While actual physical attacks by fans on charioteers were rare, the psychological pressure of knowing your performance could lead to riots or economic ruin for your supporters was immense. The atmosphere in the circus itself was a sensory overload, designed to incite this fury. The continuous roar of the crowd, punctuated by cheers, boos, and collective gasps. The constant waving of faction banners, creating a kaleidoscope of color. The betting booths, where fortunes changed hands with every lap. The vendors hawking food and drink. All of this contributed to a dizzying, intoxicating environment that pushed both drivers and spectators to the edge of their emotions. It's like the Super Bowl, the Kentucky Derby, and a political rally all rolled into one, amplified 100-fold. Even after a race, the influence of the factions continued. Winning charioteers became incredibly wealthy, but their money and fame were often tied to their faction. They were celebrities, their faces appearing on mosaics, lamps, and even children's toys, but their loyalties were expected to remain with their team. Shifting factions was rare and often seen as an act of betrayal. This tribal loyalty meant that even when not on the track, you were part of a larger, often volatile, social and political organism. The obsession with factional rivalry extended to every aspect of Roman life. People would discuss races for days, debating tactics, crashes, and the merits of their favorite drivers. Poems and songs were written about famous charioteers and their victories. The circenses, the chariot games, were not just entertainment. They were a central pillar of Roman identity, a public spectacle that reflected the city's power, its wealth, and its passions. This deep cultural embedding ensured that the stakes for charioteers were always incredibly high. Academic debates also consider how much the factions contributed to social cohesion by providing an outlet for competitive urges versus how much they contributed to social unrest through their violent rivalries. The Roman authorities, from emperors downwards, understood the power of these games. They provided bread and circuses, panem et circenses, to keep the populace happy and distracted from political grievances. But in doing so, they also created a monster. The intense factional rivalries, while entertaining, were a constant source of potential unrest. Emperors had to carefully manage their own allegiances, lest they alienate large segments of the population. The very entertainment designed to maintain order could, at any moment, erupt into full-blown civil disturbance. Ultimately, the fury of the fans and the power of the factions added a profound psychological layer to the physical dangers of being a charioteer. You race not just against the track and other drivers, but against the hopes, the wagers, and the intense, often violent, passions of hundreds of thousands of screaming Romans. Victory brought unimaginable glory, defeat brought only scorn, and sometimes the terrifying wrath of a disappointed mob. This volatile human element made every race a high-stakes emotional and physical gamble, a chilling reminder that the crowd's fury was as much a part of the peril as any crashing chariot. You've been immersed in the feverish passion of the Roman factions and the fury of their fans, a psychological pressure cooker that amplified every race. But beyond the thrill of victory and the fear of a gruesome crash, being a charioteer meant enduring the grind of the games, a relentless, physically debilitating cycle of constant training, brutal competition, and the accumulation of injuries that slowly, inevitably, wore down even the most resilient body. Imagine waking up not to the roar of the crowd, but to the chilly pre-dawn air in the stables. Your muscles ache, your joints protest, and your body carries the bruises and strains from yesterday's training runs, or worse, a race from just a few days ago. This isn't a sport with a long off-season for recovery. Chariot races, the ludi circenses, were held frequently throughout the Roman year, sometimes for dozens of days in a row during major festivals. You were expected to race, often multiple times in a single day, and to constantly push your body to its limits. This was a grind, a relentless cycle that left little time for true healing, a common, yet often understated reality was the chronic pain that charioteers lived with daily, a constant companion from their physically demanding profession. Your training regimen was brutal. It involved countless hours in the practice arenas, honing your skill at controlling 4 powerful horses, perfecting your turns around the medi, and learning to navigate the chaotic starting gates. You practiced with different horse teams, learning their individual temperaments and quirks. This wasn't just about physical exertion. It was about developing a razor-sharp instinct, lightning-fast reflexes, and an almost intuitive connection with your animals. You fell, you crashed. You were bruised and battered in practice just as often as in the actual races, learning lessons in survival the hard way. There were no simulators, no slow-motion replays, just raw experience and endless repetition under the watchful eyes of your trainers, many of whom were likely former charioteers themselves, bearing the scars of their own careers. The constant physical stress on your body was immense. The relentless vibration from the flimsy chariot, the jarring impacts from collisions, the strain on your arms and core from controlling the horses, all contributed to a litany of injuries. Think about the chronic pain-strained muscles, torn ligaments, dislocated shoulders, bruised ribs, and persistent back problems from the constant leaning and pulling. Your bones, subjected to continuous impacts, could develop stress fractures, your knees and ankles, absorbing every shock from the rough track, would suffer cumulative damage. These weren't just acute injuries. They were degenerative conditions that would plague you for your entire life, even if you survived your racing career. Then there were the cumulative effects of falls and minor crashes. Even if you avoided a fatal shipwreck, a fall could still result in broken bones, arms, legs, ribs, severe concussions, internal bleeding, and deep lacerations from being dragged across the dirt or struck by debris. Imagine breaking an arm, having it crudely set by a team physician whose medical knowledge was rudimentary by modern standards, and then being expected to race again in a few weeks or months. Infection was a constant threat, and even a simple cut could fester into a debilitating or fatal condition in an era before antibiotics. Many charioteers bore a patchwork of scars, a testament to the numerous times they had danced with death and emerged, if only temporarily, victorious over their injuries. Academic historians still piece together the exact medical knowledge and treatment methods available to Roman charioteers from scant archaeological and textual evidence, highlighting the challenging nature of surviving severe trauma in that era. The diet of a charioteer, while likely better than the common Roman citizen, was focused on performance, but not necessarily on long-term health or recovery. You would eat plenty of grain, some meat, and perhaps some vegetables. But the understanding of nutrition was basic. There were no protein shakes or complex carbohydrate loading. Your body was fueled for brute strength and immediate energy, but likely lacked the micronutrients needed to truly repair and recover from the constant punishment. A common, if slightly amusing, historical tidbit is the notion that gladiators and charioteers were sometimes called barley eaters due to their high-grain diets, which provided steady energy for their strenuous activities. Sleep offered little true recuperation. You were often housed in communal barracks within the stable complexes, constantly surrounded by the sounds and smells of horses, other charioteers, and stable hands. The mental stress of knowing another race, another gamble with death, was always just around the corner would make true. Restful sleep elusive. Your mind would be replaying turns, reliving near crashes, constantly planning for the next competition. The anxiety was a constant companion, slowly eroding your mental resilience. The grind also meant a constant demand for new horses. Horses, too, suffered injuries, exhaustion, and succumbed to the immense physical strain. They would break legs, collapse from exhaustion, or simply be too traumatized to race again. Replacing a champion horse was a costly and difficult task for the factions, meaning that even if you survived, your team might not remain intact, forcing you to constantly adapt to new animals, new temperaments, and new combinations. The relentless competitive schedule meant that your career, even if successful, was likely short-lived. Few charioteers raced for more than a decade or two, and those who did often retired with bodies broken and minds scarred by years of constant peril. The cumulative impact of the crashes, the training, and the chronic injuries eventually caught up to even the most legendary drivers. Your body was a finite resource, pushed beyond its limits until it simply couldn't endure anymore. Ultimately, the grind of the games was a slow, agonizing process of physical deterioration. Even if the meta didn't claim you, or a rival's whip didn't send you crashing, the relentless physical punishment and constant risk of injury would eventually take their toll. Being a charioteer wasn't just about facing death in a spectacular crash. It was about the daily, grinding reality of a body slowly breaking down under the immense strain of the most dangerous job in Rome. You lived with constant pain, perpetual exhaustion, and the silent knowledge that every race, even the ones you finished unscathed, brought you closer to the inevitable breaking point. You felt the agonizing grind of the games, the slow wearing down of your body and spirit under constant duress. Yet, despite the undeniable, horrific dangers, thousands of men flocked to become charioteers. This brings us to the powerful allure of fame, fortune, and fatalities, the immense rewards that drove charioteers to risk their lives, creating a paradox where extreme peril was intertwined with unimaginable glory and wealth in Roman society. Imagine yourself as a young man, perhaps born into slavery or from the lowest social strata of Roman society. You have no land, no wealth, no political influence. Your future, in most circumstances, would be a life of grinding poverty, anonymous labor, and an early, unnoticed death. But then you see them, the charioteers. They are the true superstars of Rome, more famous than generals, more adored than senators, wealthier than many patricians. Their faces are everywhere, on mosaics, lamps, drinking cups, even carved into children's toys. The roar of the crowd when they enter the arena is deafening, a wave of pure adulation. This is the glittering prize, the incredible draw that makes the brutal danger almost palatable. A common, yet often surprising detail is that many of the most famous charioteers were indeed former slaves or men of humble origins, highlighting the sport as one of the few avenues for true upward mobility in Roman society. The fame was unparalleled. Think of a modern-day rock star, sports icon, and movie star all rolled into one. When a charioteer won, particularly a famous one, the city erupted. Poets wrote odes to them. Sculptors created busts in their likeness, and their victories were inscribed in public records. Their names were shouted by hundreds of thousands, from the emperor down to the lowliest beggar. They transcended social class, becoming cultural phenomena. This level of adulation, for a man who might have been born a slave, was an intoxicating reward, a tangible measure of their incredible success. For a society obsessed with glory and spectacle, the charioteer was the ultimate embodiment of both. Then, there was the fortune. The prize money for winning a single race could be astronomical, enough to buy freedom for a slave, land for a freeman, or establish a prosperous household. But beyond the prize money, charioteers accumulated immense wealth from sponsorships, though not in the modern sense, but through gifts from their factions, appearance fees, and the sheer adoration of their fans. The most successful charioteers, like Diocles of the Red faction, accumulated fortunes that would dwarf many modern athletes, making them multi-millionaires by Roman standards. Imagine the sheer financial power, being able to buy lavish villas, acquire numerous slaves, and influence powerful politicians. This immense wealth was a stark contrast to the poverty from which many charioteers originated, a powerful incentive to brave the dangers of the track. Academic debates still analyze the exact economic structure of the Roman racing factions and the distribution of wealth, questioning whether the vast fortunes of a few top charioteers were representative of the entire profession. However, this fame and fortune came with an undeniable, ever-present caveat: the fatalities. The stands might cheer your victory one day and mourn your gruesome death the next. The lists of winning charioteers were long, but the lists of the fallen were even longer. You would see friends, rivals, and legends of the track crash be dragged and be trampled into oblivion. Their names would quickly fade, replaced by the next rising star. The bronze statues in the circus, commemorating victories, stood alongside the gravestones in the necropolis, marking the brutal cost of that glory. The very profession that offered such incredible rewards was also a guaranteed ticket to a high probability of a violent, early end. It's a bit like playing the lottery, but if the grand prize required you to leap across a chasm filled with alligators. This paradoxical relationship between immense reward and almost certain death created a unique culture around charioteers. They lived their lives on the edge, pushing physical and psychological limits. They were seen as both heroes and sacrificial lambs, revered for their bravery but implicitly understood to be expendable. This grim reality imbued their victories with even greater significance. They hadn't just won a race, they had cheated death, at least for another day. A common yet chilling Roman proverb might have been, "He who dies in the circus dies twice, once by the wheel and once by the quick forgetting." The factions, while providing the framework for their careers, also exploited this paradox. They invested heavily in training and equipping charioteers, knowing that the potential returns, both in wealth and public adoration, justified the high mortality rates. Charioteers were commodities, valuable assets to be protected and celebrated, but ultimately replaceable. This cold economic reality underscored the brutal nature of the profession, where individual lives were secondary to the success of the faction and the entertainment of the masses. For those born into slavery, the stakes were even higher. Winning a series of races could mean gaining your freedom. Imagine the profound motivation. Every terrifying turn, every near collision, every agonizing physical strain was not just for glory, but for the ultimate prize of liberty. For a slave, the risk of death on the track might have been preferable to a lifetime of unending bondage, offering a glimmer of hope that no other path could provide. This powerful incentive helps explain why so many unfree men chose this incredibly dangerous profession. Ultimately, the allure of fame and fortune in Roman chariot racing was immense, a dazzling beacon that drew men from the lowest rungs of society to risk everything. It offered a rare, intoxicating path to wealth, glory, and social mobility that was almost impossible to achieve through any other means. But the price was horrifyingly clear, the almost inevitable cost of severe injury, disfigurement, or a brutal public death. It was a trade-off that defined the lives of these ancient athletes, a testament to the powerful human drive for recognition and wealth, even in the face of near certain peril. The cheers of the crowd were intoxicating, but the silent, cold reality was that every great champion was just one broken wheel away from becoming another forgotten fatality in the dust of the circus. You've witnessed the blinding allure of fame and fortune that drew men to the deadliest profession in Rome, a stark contrast to the constant specter of injury and death. Now, as our journey through the brutal reality of being a charioteer concludes, we are left to ponder the legacy of the loss, the fleeting glory, the immense human cost, and the enduring, yet often forgotten sacrifices of these ancient athletes. Imagine the Circus Maximus today, or what remains of it, a vast empty space, mostly a park, with only the faint outline of its former glory. The thunder of hooves, the roar of the crowd, the crack of whips, the splintering wood, all have faded into the silence of history. But the stories, the names, and the grim statistics remain. What became of these legendary figures who risked everything for a moment of adulation? For the vast majority, their legacy was short-lived, eclipsed by the next generation of daredevils. A common, yet unsettling, historical fact is that while a few charioteers achieved almost mythological status, the average career span was incredibly short, measured in years, not decades, directly due to the high mortality rate. For those who did survive their racing careers, the victory was often bittersweet. Imagine an aging charioteer, perhaps missing an eye, limping from a perpetually aching leg, his body a map of scars from countless crashes. He might have amassed a fortune, built a comfortable villa, and lived out his days in quiet retirement. But the physical toll would have been immense, a constant reminder of the price of his glory, chronic pain, debilitating injuries, and perhaps a deep-seated trauma from witnessing so much death would have been his constant companions. His glory, once shouted by hundreds of thousands, would gradually fade as new champions captured the public's imagination. This physical and mental cost, often overlooked in the sagas of their triumphs, was a brutal part of their enduring legacy. Then there are the vast numbers of the unremembered, the thousands of charioteers who perished on the track. Their names lost to history, their bodies quickly cleared from the dust of the circus. For every champion like Diocles or Scorpus, whose victories were meticulously recorded, there were countless anonymous drivers who died in brutal obscurity. Imagine the sheer volume of lives extinguished in pursuit of this ultimate spectacle. Young men, often slaves, whose existence was defined by danger and whose end was a swift, violent erasure. Their only legacy was perhaps a brief mention in a local epitaph or a nameless entry on a mortuary list. Academic debates continue to attempt to quantify the total number of charioteer deaths throughout Roman history, often using epigraphic evidence from tombs to piece together this grim demographic picture. The legacy of the lost also includes the horses, these magnificent, powerful animals, bred and trained for the track, suffered immensely. Thousands upon thousands of horses broke bones, succumbed to exhaustion, or were brutally euthanized after injuries. Their sacrifice fueled the Roman passion for spectacle, yet they are almost entirely forgotten, their individual stories unrecorded. They were instruments of glory, but also anonymous victims of an insatiable public hunger for speed and carnage. A humorous, though rather dark, Roman saying might have been that the fastest horse finds glory, but also the quickest trip to the knacker's yard. The very nature of the races contributed to this fleeting legacy. The constant rotation of drivers and horses, the endless stream of new spectacles, meant that public attention was fickle. Yesterday's hero was quickly replaced by today's victor. The individual triumphs, while celebrated fiercely in the moment, rarely left a deep, lasting imprint beyond the immediate generation of fans. Only the truly exceptional, those with hundreds of victories or a unique, charismatic personality, managed to etch their names into the enduring marble of Roman history. The legacy also involves the enduring cultural fascination with these races, a fascination that persists even today. We are drawn to the combination of speed, danger, and human endurance. But in our modern appreciation, it's easy to overlook the raw, unglamorous truth of the charioteer's life, the constant fear, the chronic pain, the almost certain knowledge that your career would likely end in a violent, spectacular crash. The cinematic portrayals often focus on the glory, conveniently omitting the endless suffering that was the price of admission. Even the monumental structures like the Circus Maximus, designed for eternity, now stand mostly as ghostly outlines, a testament to the impermanence of even the grandest spectacles. The cheers are silent, the dust has settled, and the vibrant life that once filled those stands and track is long gone. Yet, in their emptiness, they serve as a silent memorial to the countless lives sacrificed for entertainment. So, as you drift off, consider the charioteers not just as figures of ancient legend, but as real people who faced unimaginable peril for the tantalizing promise of fame and fortune. Their legacy is not just in the records of their victories, but in the unseen scars they carried, the anonymous graves they filled, and the silent, thunderous echo of their brief, brutal lives on the most dangerous track in Rome. It is a legacy of extreme sacrifice, a chilling reminder of the price of glory in an age where life was cheap and entertainment reigned supreme. The journey through the dangerous world of Roman charioteers has come to an end. Let your mind dwell on images of fragile chariots, wild horses, and terrifying crashes. Feel the roar of the crowds, the harshness of the racetrack, and the deep wounds on your body. Now, all the noise has faded. All the intense emotions have subsided. There is only silence and soft darkness,